Welcome to a special edition of Stories with Brisco and Bradshaw. I'll be Bradshaw, also known as John Layfield. I'm joined, as always, with my WWE Hall of Fame partner, Mr. Gerald Brisco. And we are joined by the legendary Blue Meanie from professional wrestling, Mr. Brian Heffron. And we've got a tremendous show today because we got a documentary, The Alien Perspective, from two guys who have been very successful in their careers. Mr. Dave Foley, better known for Kids in the Hall, a stand-up comedian, and also a podcast with Tom Wheeler that shines lights on things that don't normally have lights shine on them. And Mr. Dean Alioto, who is the creator of found footage genre and also a documentary filmmaker, debunked his own documentary movie and got kind of started in the UFO sector. But they have Alien Perspective, which is available on Amazon right now to rent or to buy. They'd prefer you to buy it. I'm sure they get more money for that. I hope they do, because we bought one. But gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. I'll let you tell your own story. Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys, I want to start off with a simple question for you guys, and it's just kind of about your passion. You guys both have a passion for UFOs, UAPs. What, to both of you guys, why UFOs? Why UAPs? Why is that your passion?
Dave, you take it.
All right. Well, I would say I guess it became a passion because I guess the underlying passion was I want to know basically what reality is, what's going on in the world that's true. And I mean, that's kind of driven everything I've done for my whole life. I'm just curious about what's true and what isn't. And so I've always been sort of interested in the UFO subject, but then over the last 10 years, I've gotten sort of dove headfirst into it because there was just such a wealth of really great credible testimony and data, and of course, I sort of dove into ahead of the New York Times article in 2017. But there's too much evidence for anyone who's serious about if you're serious about thinking. There's too much evidence to ignore. And I was very curious about how we're still managing to ignore it, how most of the population is still managing to ignore it, and how did we get conditioned to turn a blind eye to something this important. So that's kind of what dragged me into it. And then of course, after I dove into this for a while, then I actually had an actual UFO encounter with my friend Jeremy Corbell, which I guess is not uncommon that people that engage with this wind up having the phenomena engage with them.
Did that
we're hoping that happens to us then.
Yeah, we would love that.
It could.
Did that encounter with Jeremy Corbell, your good friend, did that validate what you already thought, or did that increase what you already thought?
Well, I think Jeremy and I were both pretty convinced that there's something real to the UFO phenomenon, and that there is a cover up of it. I think if anything, I think both of us kind of went, oh damn, oh now we're experiencers, and as opposed to just being guys looking at the data and judging it on its merits. Now we've had this experience, and we thought, oh, this is kind of oddly undermines our credibility, but definitely and totally reinforces in my mind that these things are real. I mean, when you've seen a really large structured craft floating in front of you for about a minute, you go, oh well, all right, I have no other explanation than that is non-human.
Right. You said that undermines your credibility. Did you find that doing these research there, back when I was young, the people who talked about UFO sightings were usually old farmers or people out in the country, and they didn't have much credibility. Now guys like you and Dean are coming forward, and scientists are coming forward. Do you see that perception changing a lot?
You didn't know David?
Why do you think it's changing?
You didn't know Dave was a farmer?
We didn't know that.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, I was raised amongst farmers for a bunch of my life, but
I grew up working on a farm, so Mr. Briscoe's making fun of me. I think
I grew up in Oklahoma, so I'm a hillbilly anyway. So
I had all my friends were all sheep farmers back when I was in middle school. up until high
But
school.
isn't that true? I mean, you didn't really hear back in the '60s a lot of scientific people, admitting at least that there was a perception out there of these things in our
Well,
universe.
the ones that did were fairly effectively often had their careers destroyed.
Right.
Like there was a guy named James McDonald who came out and criticized government secrecy, basically said there is a UFO story to be told, and criticize things like the Condon report, which was the report, the University of Colorado report about the Blue Book files.
Mm-hmm.
And that report basically shut down Blue Book. And James McDonald said, well, wait a minute. The summary that's at the front of the Condon report doesn't match any of the data within the Condon report. Why isn't anyone actually reading the report and reporting on it? And so he went on with media and basically had his career destroyed for doing it. Just because he said, look at the data that's in the report that you're using to shut down a UFO program.
Why were they pushing this knowledge back from people? The government just, is it still the same today? The government just don't want us to know what's going on? Or
I think it's changing, but it hasn't changed a lot. What do you think, Dean?
It's a different version of kind of the same. We were actually, if you look at it, we'll use a sports analogy. We've gone another 10, maybe 20 yards, depending on where we started. If we started in the end zone, we're out of the end zone, I would say. But there's still a lot of mileage to go. We still have people who are first or usually secondhand. I'm all about the firsthand. People who have touched these things and experienced them and been a part of those programs directly. But I think it's kind of like until a UFO tailpipe is dropped on the congressional hearing table, right, or a dead alien arm. I think we're going to get as far as we can get. But what's really interesting is that the media just goes for the real blatant stuff, but there's so much more nuance that is happening now that we've gotten. And as David was saying, it used to be this stigma, this scarlet letter that you would be stamped with.
Right. Yeah.
Presidential candidates were disqualified basically because of saying that, which is why Jimmy Carter kept it on the down low after he became president. But so I think that it has gotten further, but there's still, I think now we can see actually how much further that we need to go, which is new. So I kind of want to, it's kind of two things. One is I want to say, hey, we were able to get close to the entree. We had an hors d'oeuvre, we had an appetizer, we still need the entree, but at least we've had those two items on the menu. So I do feel, pretty good about that.
I love your analogy, dropping a tailpipe on a legislator's desk there, but jumping ahead at the end of your fantastic documentary, the bits and pieces of the guy that have got those foreign objects, as we call them in our wrestling business, got those foreign objects in their head. Mm-hmm. I can't wait till part 2 to see what the results were.
Yeah, I'm actually just finishing part 2. The animation just wrapped up last week, so it's a whole next level. I do want to say, I have to say this beforehand. So I've always been interested in UFOs, but there was a period where I was really interested in professional wrestling until I got my first headbutt.
Who headbutted you?
A buddy of mine who he had like 4 brothers. And I came over and it was like, there was Andre the Giant and then someone with the name Moon in it.
Moondog.
Yeah,
Moondog Spot or Rex or one of those guys.
Yeah, and we're watching this and everything, and they did a headbutt, and I went, whoa, that's insane. And he goes here, and he grabs my buddy Don Caulfield, and he headbutts me and knocks me on my ass, and I'm like, I think I'm gonna watch. I'm not gonna participate. I'll go play football where I can wear a helmet.
That's right.
In my life, I've learned. I've pulled this practical joke on myself where I've fallen in love with things I have to defend my whole life. One being UFOs, my love of professional wrestling, and which was the better singer in Van Halen. So my whole life I've had to defend myself and all those things. But I've been a follower my whole life. I believe I've seen one August 1982 in Margate, New Jersey, when I was 9 years old. And ever since then, I've been fascinated with the world of UFOs, UAP. And after, the jumping off point in 2017, when the New York Times article came out, I find myself becoming a little bit frustrated, because in the world of UAP, I believe that the ultimate believer and the ultimate skeptic are essentially the same person. And the fact that there's people I want to believe, and then there's the experts. You got Stephen Greer, you got Lou Elizondo. Those two seem to be butting heads. So you're like, okay, who's telling the real story here? Then you got the professional skeptics like Mick West, trying to, who's waiting on every tweet to come out about UFOs to debunk everything. So as a follower in the world of UAPs and UFOs, how do you guys try to filter out who's essentially telling the truth and who might be a carny just trying to sell us snake oil?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things is I think the term belief shouldn't even enter into it anymore. I mean, or maybe never should have. Like I'm not a believer in UFOs. I'm just someone who's looked at testimony and data and gone, well, there's too much here to ignore. There's a pretty good body of evidence that we just have to accept something is flying in the skies that we can't identify. What if it's non-human? It's not. We'll find that out. We don't know. We don't know what that is. Somebody might, but we don't know. So I'm not. I'm a. I just go with the most likely truth is that UFOs are real and that they don't seem to be of human origin, because because we don't seem to be able to do anything even close to what they're able to do. So if we can't come close to that technology, then maybe somebody else built it.
Dean,
Yeah.
you had a lot of crime dramas, so you're good with statistics and things that matter. You mentioned the Project Blue Book earlier, which was from 52 to 69, the government investigation arm. It started with Project Sign, which is 47 to 48, followed by Project Grudge, which was mainly a debunking part of the government. It's been come out since that was what they were doing. But even in Project Grudge, 23% of what they had was unexplained. That seems to be an incredibly high number that would lead credence to the fact they have no idea what they're doing.
No, I always kind of look to where we're headed. And so, as an example of that, we are going to be able to do off-world traveling, and at some point go to other. It won't be the physics that we have now, but it'll be physics that we invent, because we're not even a type 1 species. So there is going to be advances that'll happen, and we will go to other planets. And a buddy of ours, Michael P. Masters, who's a professor at Montana Tech,
He's
he
great.
believes that they're from the future, because we are, and Einstein allowed for this, that we will be able to time travel. And when we do that, where are we going to go? We're going to come in the past. But the thing is, and Dave and I have talked about this before, the longer you're in this, the more you realize a few things. One is it's all the above and none of the above. and you don't know what you think you know. So like my journey of making this documentary, the 7 years it took to do this, I learned what I don't know more than I learned what I do know. And so, for me, I got to a place where I had done, like you said, crime shows, and I've done documentaries for, A&E, Bravo, Discovery, et cetera, and done these biopics and stuff. And because of my first film, I went to this UFO convention for the anniversary of it, where it was believed to be real. And so I went there and I spoke. It was kind of like a TED Talk thing. And everyone was so cool. It was the nicest audience. These people are the sweetest, nicest people that it's a community. It really is in the truest sense. And then I started meeting people who were fine coming out of the closet about this. And I realized, wow, if this could be corralled in a way and presented in a way where it would address not just those in the community, but those beyond that. And so the main demarcation that I wanted to do, compared to every other documentary, and a lot of them are fantastic, is instead of going from the human's perspective, this one was going to be looked at from the alien's perspective, even as a hypothetical. And because of that, we were able to get Michio Kaku and a whole bunch of fantastic, Michael Masters, a whole bunch of fantastic people, including the guy who created the simulation reality hypothesis, Dr. Nick Bostrom. And so you look at the spectrum of all this and the journey that it takes to get here, and it is fun, it is enjoyable, and you'll be surprised the people that you meet. And that's, I met David through a mutual friend, Deep Prasad, and David was throwing down on his posts, and I looked at the stuff that he was into and his opinions and stuff. And when I interviewed him, it was like, yeah, this has been, embedded in him. And we kept saying before he had his experience, I'm untainted. I've not seen a UFO yet. But I kept, both of us were kind of like Spielberg, who hasn't seen a UFO, who wants to feel it and get as close as we can. And so I actually do want to ask Dave, now that some distance has happened, how has that affected you and your journey with discovery, self-discovery in this field?
Well, it's odd. Like as I said, one of the oddest things about the experience I had with Jeremy was that neither of us reacted in any kind of a rational way. Because the rational thing would have been to freak out and, and to be screaming and going, oh my God, what are we, but we were both dead silent for the whole thing. And, as I said, except for at one point where Jeremy goes, I'm not even going to try to take a picture. And that's
for a filmmaker.
For a filmmaker who has dedicated his life to studying the subject. And as I've told Jeremy, and he hates that this is my opinion, but I said, I don't think you were talking to me. I think you were struggling with whatever it was that was controlling our behavior. Because all our emotions were completely tamped down. We had no emotional response to it. And to this day, I have no emotional connection to the thing I saw. And it feels like that was by design. And so even today, it's kind of just there. I go, yeah, I saw this thing. I have, there's no one can tell me what else it might have been. As I said, and it seemed to show up because I asked it to, which was another odd part of it.
Tell us about your sighting. I mean, where was it? What was the circumstances, and what were you on?
Yeah, well, we were just actually out walking Jeremy's dog wow. in these orange groves, in this country road, and it really was it was a beautiful clear night, and I think it was I can't remember now. It seemed like it was maybe a moonless night, so there were a lot of stars, and you could see the and I was looking at the commercial air traffic in the distance and how clearly I could see it all. And I just said to Jeremy, this would be a good night to see something. And 30 seconds wow. later, Jeremy goes, turn around, Dave. And that's when we saw this thing. Yeah. And it was this orangey gold object in the distance, right where I had been looking at the air traffic, but it was about 10 times the size of anything else that that was there. And we watched it circle about 3/4 of the valley that we were in until it was hanging right in front of us for about a minute.
And what set this apart from regular air traffic? Was it doing zigzags, or was it?
No, it was just. Well, apparently Jeremy said before I turned around, he saw it come in at about a 45-degree angle from above down to like the just above the horizon line. And he saw it come down at an incredible speed and then stop. And then it just started this very gradual. It covered probably, a good 30 miles in about a minute and a half.
I got to ask you this question. They didn't do an anal probe on you, did they?
No, they didn't. I
saw one of your skits.
He did ask.
I know. It was awesome. Brian sent us your skit right before he came on air about the anal probe. That was one of the funniest things. That was so good.
I think part of that is the my favorite part of that is like we've been traveling, for 50 years, we've been traveling 250,000 light years to probe these people just to find out one doesn't really seem to mind.
Yeah, yeah, and that sketch was, comes from my interest in UFOs, but also was a thinly veiled sort of. It was really about how I felt about writing sketch comedy at the time. It's like,
Dean, you
like,
had one thing. You talk
purpose.
about rational response. Sergeant Jim Penniston, when Rendlesham Forest, you guys in your documentary, The Alien Perspective, go over a couple of very famous UFO sightings, the Tic Tac, as they call it, off San Diego, and Rendlesham Forest, which is east of London, kind of close near the sea. But Sergeant Jim Penniston, December 26, 1980, he allegedly, and there's no reason to dispute this, touched a UFO. But one of the reasons that you thought was so unique about this was something you also saw with the Harvard professor John Mack when he wanted to debunk the alien abductions was PTSD. And when he described this to you, it was an incredible emotional thing. And you have all this and really well done in your documentary Alien Perspective. Tell us a little bit about Sergeant Jim Penniston and the PTSD that came afterwards and why that's important.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm a little dyslexic. And so when I'm looking at things, taking information in, I'm a visual person, which makes sense that, why I'm a filmmaker. Looking at footage like the Tic Tac footage, where you see this little Tic Tac object on basically, it looks like Pong. The stuff that we've seen, the infrared footage, it looks like, black and white Pong way back in the day.
It does, yes.
But
us old guys will know exactly what that is.
Atari guys. And so there's a big difference between that and then what Fravor talks about from his pilot seat point of view. And so that's when I hit on the idea that I wanted to hook up with the guy who did the animation for the Oscar-winning documentary Searching for Sugarman, Arvid Steen, and have him recreate it. So all of us, the rest of us, who weren't in the cockpit at the time can actually be there and can see what it was like for him, and then also can see, the craft. And so since I knew that I was going to be doing that, one of the cases that is the most open and shut case, if you will, for me, is the James Penniston, where he did, here's an officer who touches this craft, and there's two other witnesses with him at the time. It was so credible. And then what happened, how it affected him. When I was interviewing him, doing these crime shows, you're talking to someone who was a witness, and crime is all about the witnesses, and you're going to get different variations and stuff because everyone's going to be bringing their own stuff to it and filling in, blank spots. So I start taking him back and saying, take me there, the forest, it's kind of cold and dewy and the trees and everything. What does this look like? And then he just goes into this like fugue state before me. And says, yeah. And I go, are you okay? And he says, yeah, you just need to know that when you're telling me this and you're describing those things, I'm now there. And I'm like, oh, good. So tell me what it's like. And he goes, no, Dean, I am there. Like I can tell you the grooves, what the design is on the bark next to me. I can tell you what the leaves look like. Nothing else in my life I can do that. But here I can do it. And he started welling up and we took a little break and came back and he walked me through everything of what it was like beat for beat. So I was honored that he, trusted us, that we were able to get that. But that case, he touches the craft and he talks a little bit about it. But in part two, we go into an even deeper thing. In fact, he reveals a couple things that he hadn't said before. So
it's the one case where he got a disability for the effects of the UFO had upon him.
John Burroughs, his I guess it would be his subordinate that was working underneath him. He was able to get that.
John McCain helped fight to get them the disability.
Yeah.
For the effects of the UFO.
And it took like more than 20 years, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And it took John McCain stepping in, but he actually was finally compensated and was receiving the treatments he needed, for his exposure to a UFO, which had given him negative health effects for the rest of his life.
And he's not the only one.
Yeah, it's very common. Yeah. The fact that Gary Nolan over at Stanford was brought in by the CIA to look at patients who had been exposed to UFOs, because he had developed the best machines in the world for doing blood analysis, and he was also brought in to try and look at Havana syndrome, and he quickly sort of was able to delineate the differences between Havana syndrome and people who had been exposed to UFOs. He said, they're both damaged similarly but differently. So again, he was brought in by the CIA to look at these patients, and that's how he kind of got involved with the modern kind of UFO movement, disclosure movement. But we talked about John Mack, and what John Mack discovered, like after he was introduced to oh God, I'm blanking on his name, the great
Bud Hopkins.
Bud Hopkins, yeah. So he met Bud Hopkins, who was trying to help experiencers or abductees cope with what they'd been through. And so John Mack started talking to these people, and he said, look, I don't know what happened to them, but I know they're suffering real damage. So if the damage is real, let's try to figure out what the cause was. Right. And the more he dug into it, the more he felt like these people had a real experience, and that was his field of expertise, was trying to distinguish between the fantasy and reality in patients. That was what he was. That's why he was the head of Harvard psychiatry. And again, because he took these people seriously and didn't prescribe a lot of drugs to numb them, and didn't have any of them institutionalized. Harvard tried to take away his tenure. They tried to take away his license. They basically did everything they could over about a 2-year period to destroy his credibility and his career. Just because he was listening to people, which is kind of at the core of what a psychiatrist is supposed to do.
Sure.
But I do want to make a distinction, which is it wasn't Harvard that was doing this. It was some of the other coworkers who were very jealous and were looking at this and saying, this might affect us. And so they put together a little, and there was just a few of them, just enough, to have this campaign set against him. And so ironically, it was a bigger group of Harvard colleagues and from other colleges that came in support of John that actually saved him.
Yeah.
Guys, in your Tic Tac video and in the portion of Alien Perspective on Tic Tac, the Navy says, we don't know what this is. This is not us. But then there's not a follow-up. And what gets me about the government is you had David Grush that went on the congressional testimony this past November and claimed under oath that the government had alien biologics. This is the biggest discovery in the history of this world, if this is true. And as soon as he is done, they simply say, well, owned Hunter Biden's laptop. It's just, you just completely forget about it. Why is it, you think, Jimmy Carter saw a UFO, or at least he said he did, and then he tried to open the UFO files, and famously George H.W. Bush, head of the CIA, said, no, you're on a need-to-know basis, even the president of the United States. Why is the government so reticent to either acknowledge this or they actively suppress this, in your opinion?
Boy, it's kind of a grab bag because, first of all, just let's walk through this. A UFO crashes, you get your hands on it, and if there's been one or a few, there being various states of wreckage, but you have this technology. Do you want to announce to Russia that you have, and to these other nations, and say, hey, we have this stuff? I mean, I doubt that UFOs would just crash in one country. So, Brazil, there's a great case that James Fox did in Moment of Contact.
Virginia.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that the government has always controlled information, always. And so, like when I've spoken at some of these UFO conventions, one in Shag Harbor, part of my little speaking engagement, I ask about disclosure. What do people want? And when we talk about anti-gravitational technology, so if you've got these crafts and the government has that technology of anti-gravity, as an example, which is clearly they're using some form of that to fly these things, that can be weaponized. And so anytime something becomes that can be weaponized, it goes into Department of Energy or DOD, confiscates it. That's it. So it's all about controlling power, controlling this technology. And so the fact that the government came out, Navy, just took one branch to say that we don't know what these things are, is pretty monumental. And that act alone stopped the newscasters from queuing up the X-Files theme music every time they talk about UFOs.
Yeah.
So, David, I don't know what your take is on
I was
that.
just also going to say that you got to remember the Tic Tac event. The government had all that information. They, and they did have, the tapes from the radar tracking, multiple radar tracking. And so they had all this information for 14 years before the New York Times article came out. And so after 14 years, when they were asked, they said, we don't know what this is. We can't explain it. But the media was quite happy to take the word of a video game programmer with no knowledge of how the atflare works, and take his word over 6 aviators who all witnessed this object. Six of the most trained human beings on the face of the earth all saw the Tic Tac with their eyes. So they saw it with their eyes. They tried to trace it. They tried to capture, they tried to intercept it and couldn't. So there's a lot of corroborating testimony there. And on top of that, there was a lot of radar and the FLIR video that we all saw, which when, if you listen to the people that took the video, and they'll tell you what they saw and what the video shows. And so you can listen to them, or you can listen to a video game programmer who tells you that these incredibly talented and courageous pilots and aviators, they somehow lost their ability to recognize a commercial aircraft or another military aircraft in their airspace. For some reason that day, none of them could identify a jet in the distance.
Right.
Even though their lives depend on being able to do that.
And our country's security depends on them doing that.
Yeah. And one of the most sophisticated sensor systems in the world is a human being. Right. So if you train one properly, people always say that, well, eyewitness testimony is the worst testimony. And which is a very specious argument, because yes, in the event of, say, a bank robbery, if you got people that are just in the bank doing their deposits, and somebody runs in with a gun and holds up the bank, their adrenaline's going to be pumping. They're going to be panicked and fearful. They may not observe everything very well, so their eyewitness testimony is dubious, right? But that isn't what these people are. I would say it's more like, if you asked just anyone, all right, well, walk through this park, and when they get to the other side of the park, tell me every plant you saw. I might be able to go, I saw some pine trees, some shrubs, there were some flowers. I won't know the names of any of the trees. But then if you ask a botanist to walk through that same park, and when he gets to the other side, tell me what you saw, he'll be very much more detailed. And if you tell him before he walks through that park, when you get to the other side, I'm going to ask you what you saw, then he'll be even more detailed. And that's the situation you're dealing with when you're dealing with a Top Gun pilot, because they go into the air knowing that they're going to be debriefed when they land. So they are paying acute attention to every single detail of what they observe in the air. So that's the eyewitness testimony. The eyewitness testimony of the botanist who's told that they're going to be questioned at the other side of the park. Right. That's what that eyewitness testimony.
Damn it, David! I want this. Now I've got to shoot more footage and put that in. I want that bite. That's like
you got to walk through the park now.
It's brilliant. It's a great analogy.
Yeah. To me, when it comes to the government keeping this secret from us, to me, ultimately comes down to power. Imagine, the world finds out that there's something greater than us. They could come here. First, if you're the military, imagine telling the people, there's something in our skies that we cannot defend you against. That would a sense of panic. Then there's the belief system. No matter what your religion is, it might, make you, reevaluate, your belief system. And then ultimately, like you said, we were trying to hide our secrets from the other government because we know Russia and China have their own programs, and if they would have figured it out, by now, Putin would have landed a UFO in the White House lawn by now. So to me, it's ultimately about power and keeping secrets and money. You get the technology, and then there's technology out there that they've classified and kept from the American people or kept from the world, where if you develop clean energy, we don't need wind turbines. We don't need to go for coal, or we don't need to drill for oil. It's all there. So to me, it's ultimately about the power.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And there's definitely, if your job is to protect the public and there's something that you can't defend against, you're not going to want to advertise it. It's like, I mean, like Lou Elizondo said, he said, look, and what if they come out and say, all right, yeah, these things are here, and they can do whatever they want. We can't really take them down. We can't do anything. Oh, and by the way, they can observe you 24 hours a day, every day of your life, and can interact with you at any time they want, and we can't stop them. Yeah. That's what the military has to admit to.
See, and that's a really good point. I just want to underscore that the experiencers, as in alien abductees, really haven't had a seat at the table, because that is a messy can of worms.
Right.
Because the thing is, again, if you can do this, if you can travel and come here from wherever they are, whether it's interdimensional, from the future, et cetera, you do have that power. But how many times, David, do you know, and guys, I'm putting it out to you, how many cases do you know of an alien that has shot a laser at another, at a human, craft and taken it down? Zero that I'm aware of. So they seem to be like scientists, very observational. And, we were joking about the anal probe thing. And if you talk to Michael Masters, he'll tell you it's not a probe. Just look at what we do when we tranquilize a bear, right? We knock it out, and then we take a stool sample. And that's part of what that would probably be. And so that to me was a big, sounds almost, silly or trivial, but the probe is kind of this joke that gets thrown and it's easy fodder, but you would do that. You would, as well as you would take blood and you would take DNA and all that stuff.
Well, look at cattle mutilation, where farmers find their cattle with laser-like precision, where they remove the eyes, the tongue, the insides without a drop of blood being taken. They're there to study and see what makes us tick, or see like you said with the anal probe, taking a DNA test.
Yeah. And also the other thing about the cattle mutilations is you got to bear in mind that there have been tens of thousands of cases of cattle mutilations and zero prosecutions. Not one person has ever been arrested for it. And these are major felonies because cows are expensive.
Yes.
We're talking about something that's worth thousands of dollars, these animals, and they're being destroyed. And there has not been one arrest or prosecution. And that's pretty unique. And we don't have many crime stories that have a zero suspect profile.
Yeah, one of the best parts of the documentary to me was the question that you ask, and you talk about what is the government going to do. That you asked Lisa Quintana, who's the head of SETI, or member of SETI, which is Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, the acronym. When you ask her, go ahead you tell a story about the question you asked her, because I thought it was so prescient to the government about what they might or might not do. They don't really have a plan.
Yeah, Elisa Quintana is actually at NASA, and she's the deputy in charge of the TESS program, which is this program, the satellite that goes out there and it's mapping the universe. So I asked her, I said, okay. And it was at the end of the interview. And I said, what happens when you do find this thing that you guys have been looking for with all this technology that you've been updating? You've got the James Webb Telescope now, super powerful. What happens when you do find that planet that you can see like an electric grid of a city, and you find that intelligent civilization? What happens then? What's the next step? And she just started getting the giggles on camera, and it's in the documentary. And she's like, I don't know. And she says, we spent all this time trying to get the next flagship technology. She goes, geez, I I think you go to SETI because I know they've got a protocol, maybe there. And so that's the problem. Like when I started out with this documentary, I went, oh, I'll be done in 9 months, like I've done with other documentaries. I'll do 15 interviews called a day. No, I go to NASA and NASA's now sending me to SETI. And so I'm now going to SETI. So it's this gateway where someone says, oh, you should talk to this or that. Or you find these holes where it's like, I need to bridge this. Who would I go to? And so Elisa, she was very caught off guard by it. And I thought, well,
it's like the dog who catches the car.
I love that. I love that question.
What
do we do now? That was my favorite question, I think, in the entire documentary when you asked that question. What do we do? I mean, with this Webb, satellite, our camera that we have now replaced the Hubble, the Webb, I mean, the fantastic shot that we're getting back from space, it's got to be so enlightening to the scientists out there. And just where do they go from here? And so that's my question. What do they do? I mean, what do we do when we actually find out life is out there?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's already happening is the first thing we got to do is make sure scientists aren't afraid to tell us when they find out.
Yeah.
That they won't, if they find out something that they didn't want to, that they won't be destroyed for finding it.
We'll have an Orson Welles moment of War of the Worlds.
Yeah, because it's because that's the amazing. We're still in the grip of the stigma. We're still in the grip of
right.
of basically a social engineering program to get people to not think about this.
Do you guys think that AI, that the development of AI and the way it's progressing now, do you think that's going to give us a lot of solutions to our questions, or you think they'll have questions?
Well, I just watched an interview with, from the Soul Foundation, which is a group that Gary Nolan started to get scientists and academics and also policy people involved with the subject. And they're talking like they're trying to figure out the what's next plan, as a group of scientists and military. Like Carl Nell is both a scientist and a military man, and he's famously came out was it a year ago, 2 years ago? He came out and said, when he's asked what is the likelihood that the non-human intelligences exist and are here, and his answer was 0 doubt.
Wow. Okay, yeah. I have to ask you a question that's probably unanswerable, but since you do this from the alien perspective, which is the title of your documentary, which is fantastic, you do it from the perpetrator perspective. The question is motive. Why are they here, and where are they from? Any ideas, gentlemen?
I could tell you. I need you to sign an NDA. We need to go into. We have an inflatable skiff, though, so it's not a big hassle. It's just,
right.
A bicycle tire pump, and we're good to go. Yeah, that's the $1 million question. But as David says in, I believe it's part 2, sign of intelligence is curiosity. And so just by virtue of being this advanced, species, they would be curious. I think it would be more anthropological than anything else. It must be really hard for them. And again, no one talks about this, but it must be really hard for a civilization that has transcended nuclear, weaponry and God knows whatever they, created to destroy each other. They transcended that, and they look at us, and we're still bickering. We're still, looking at these borders and holding them and not looking at, the overview effect, which is what astronauts, have, where they can look at the planet as this whole holistic thing. And so I think for them, they're studying us, to drill down. It's a whole other subject, which is like the hybrid program, where the belief that they may be interacting with us and creating a kind of a hybrid, if you will. But I think it's really, my take on it is that it's an anthropological study of us. Sometimes they seem to definitely influence us in ways, and that's interesting. But I think they keep it. I think they keep it a secret. It's kind of like the prime directive of Star Trek, even though every episode they're interacting and Kirk is hooking up with a green
That's right.
woman.
Yeah.
Kirk was the man.
Yeah.
It's a directive. Sure, you don't always follow it.
Right.
Dean,
Right.
Dean, you have some wonderful footage, and how coincidental it had to be for you. I mean, you probably sat out on your patio tens and hundreds of nights, just looking at the skies there. And one night you're standing out there, you not only see one, two, but you saw seven, I believe, flying objects in the air. Did you think at first they were drones, or what was your thought when you first saw them?
No. So that's a weird thing. And I think it's prosaic. So I'm not saying that I've had an experience yet. My metric is I need to see something as profound as David and Jeremy saw. But almost a month before the drone flap happened in Jersey, my girlfriend and I are on our deck, and I'm noticing through my window, actually, before I went out on the deck, that I am seeing a whole bunch of activity in the sky. So I go out on the deck and I see 7 drones flying around. And I'm trying to listen to see if I can hear helicopters, but I use drones for filmmaking all the time, but we only use one. We don't have 2 of them going if I want to get an aerial shot. There's 7. And so I grabbed camera and I was able to videotape it for 4 minutes. And they were just moving around, and then they would get really bright, and then they would kind of slow down. And I posted it on TikTok through not TikTok, TikTok, the other TikTok. My daughter posted a thing on my website is called Capture, or my TikTok is called Capture Pictures Official. And I posted it in 4 sections asking people. And some people said, oh, those are planes. And that's people love to throw out prosaic things and they don't really look at the footage. It's just a whitewash. And I'm saying none of these crafts are going to LAX to the left. They're all staying around, moving around. After 4.5 minutes, I went back inside and they still continued. And I wasn't able to fully register that when I use a drone in 20, 30 minutes at most, I've got to bring it back down. And I've got to switch out batteries. This just kept going to the point where it was like, okay, enough. I'm just, going to go watch Severance. Yeah. So then I went back and I looked at the footage after the flap and was like, wait a second. And it changed my experience from that, which was kind of telling. But I have no idea what's going on. But it's really jacked up because everyone's like, let's get Trump in. He'll get in and he's a disclosure president. And the opposite happens in that first statement where they come out and said, no. Even though the FAA said nothing, that they knew nothing of what was going on, and the FBI had to make a formal announcement. They said, we don't know what's going on. All of a sudden they come on and say, yeah, we knew about it. We licensed it. We were totally fine with some research being done over civilians. It's I don't know. That to me is more disturbing than the phenomenon, if you ask me.
And to add to that, there was also incursions over Langley Air Force Base and several bases in the UK simultaneously
for 17 days over Langley.
Yeah, and people are yelling about the New Jersey drones, but this was happening all over the world.
They're jamming the technology. Like they go to send another drone up, and they jam it, and these things would drop out of the sky. I mean, this is aggressive.
Yeah, police helicopters tried to chase them, and they disappear. They go dark, they said, but not just that the lights go off. The engine noise disappears. And
I live out in a county out here in Florida. I know if drones started flying over my property out there, there'd be 2 or 3 old Grove guys out here shooting the damn things down. And I was going, knowing the Jersey people like I know those Jersey people and Philly people, I'm shocked that somebody didn't take aim at one of those things.
Oh, I think some people did.
Some people did.
Yeah. Some people did try to shoot them down. But that's the thing. You got to remember that 17 days over Langley. Again, one of our most important bases, in the United States.
Exactly.
This where the
Wright Patterson Air Force Base as well. Wright Patterson had to shut down.
They had to shut down traffic. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, they for 17 days, um, they couldn't stop them from coming in. They couldn't knock any of them out of the sky. They couldn't trace where they went to when they left.
Wow.
And so calling them drones is clearly just a way to get people to stop thinking about it.
So their radar ships, basically these things appear and then they just totally disappear. And what we're
they
saying
couldn't track the path coming in or out at any point in that 17 days. Again, same thing in New Jersey. No one could track where these things were coming from. And even if we say, yeah, maybe there's a lot of people sending up their own, as you said, setting up their own drones to try and look at these things. So probably a lot of the stuff in the sky that people were seeing they were misidentifying aircraft because they were paying attention, and there were just normal drones up there, but none of that explains something the size of an SUV hovering about 200 feet in the air for 5 hours.
And you mentioned President Trump, very similar to President Carter. He said he was going to release all this stuff, and he didn't. He has a very capricious personality, so he still may. He could this afternoon, but so far, what he said is not coming to fruition. Just like Jimmy Carter, that doesn't seem like a coincidence.
No, well, they put out what is usually the case. The explanations for these things is always almost harder to believe than that it's
Right.
aliens. Aliens is easier to believe than the explanations they give. So yeah, they said, these were FAA drones doing research and other things. That's the explanation.
And other things.
And the trouble is, the FAA a month earlier testified under oath that they had no idea what these things were. So if this is the true story, then the FAA officials who testified that they didn't know what they were perjured themselves and should be up on charges.
Right.
So again, it's the ludicrousness of it. Or the earlier explanation was these are all just normal drones and aircraft. It's just that people are just suddenly looking up at the sky who had never looked at the sky before.
And they just happened to be flying over some of the most secure military bases in the world.
Well, and you mentioned the Carter before. If you're going to be in office in Carter's case, for only one term, 4 years, why do you need to share that with them? Even 8 years. It's not like the Supreme Court where you're there, you're on the bench for life. And so I don't really feel that, we've tried to kind of reverse engineer this to go, well, Reagan, maybe he knew, definitely George Sr. would know, and probably his son. There's a great story, David, I don't know if you know about this, you probably do, about Jackie Gleason and how he used to play golf with Nixon. And Nixon knew that he was into UFOs. And so one night he shows up in a town car, Nixon does, and
without security detail.
Without security detail, and people go, "Oh, that's bullshit. That would never happen." Well, no, there is a record of him doing this. He loved to do this and shake the security details. He got off on it. Nixon did. So he picks up Jackie and he takes him to Wright-Patterson base, and shows him not only some material, but shows them some alien bodies. And so what happens is, and he's told not to tell anyone, and he comes home and his wife wakes up in the middle of the night, and this guy is so into UFOs, he's got every book. Not only that, he lives, I believe it's in Connecticut, he lives in this house that is shaped like a UFO. And so he's there getting smashed, getting totally hammered. And she goes, "Babe, what are you doing up? It's 4 a.m. And he goes, "Son of a bitch, it's real. It's all real." And she's like, "What are you talking about?" "I just saw them," and tells the story. And he is like effed up big time by this. What John Mack would call ontological shock.
Right.
He's got to now recalibrate, even though he believed in this. He's got to recalibrate because now it's real. So it jacked him up. And this was mentioned. His wife mentioned it in Look magazine. So that's how this story got out. But Jackie Gleason on set on his movies after that, he would, bend people's ears and say, no, this stuff is real. So anyway.
Wow. I play golf with not. I don't want to say that. I play golf at the same country club that President Obama plays golf at here in Bethesda, Maryland. He probably has 100 golf courses, so he probably plays everywhere. So I don't want to make it sound special. I've only shook his hand. I do not know him, but
Well, you not only shook his hand, you nearly got hit by his golf
I did almost
ball.
got hit by a golf ball by him one time. Which yeah, I didn't even get to keep the golf ball. He was very affable and very nice. He was a very nice man. But he famously will tell his opponents when they're putting, he goes, "You know, those aliens are wild." And that's his catchphrase that he always tells these guys,
They're wild.
Just to kind of shock them a little bit in the
Yeah.
little banter of golf. So not
Throw them off their game.
nothing serious, I don't think. You guys, before we let you go, and you guys have been so generous with your time. Why did you choose these two? And in the alien perspective, the Tic Tac and both the forest, the Rendlesham Forest sightings. Why did you choose these two?
I chose them because one is the Tic Tac case is so visual. It's Top Gun with the UFO. I mean, it doesn't get better than that. So I wanted to recreate that, where you see this fighter jet, Top Gun pilot, a commander, going toe to toe until the Tic Tac shows him what's what. So I wanted to see that, and once I knew I was doing that, the other case that I wanted to see was the Rendlesham Forest, where someone in the military actually went up and touched a craft. I don't know many people that, even experiencers, abductees that have been able to go outside a craft and touch it. And for him to do that, I wanted to, for me, I want him to walk me through what it felt like. And he describes everything, the smells, the senses, the touch to it and everything. He was taking pictures, but it was radioactive, whatever was coming out. So none of the pictures developed. It's a profound case because there's other witnesses that were there, and it happened over 2 nights. So it's well documented. So for me, these are two cases that are like the epitome. The other one is Socorro, New Mexico, which I actually did, but I had to pull it out for pacing and timing. It may end up in another story where police officer Lonnie Zamora saw this craft with these beings and everything and get into it, and take off in front of them. Right in the middle of the day. But these two cases are Star Wars cases. These are important cases. And I just wanted to externalize that through animation and have people be able to see it and take it in and go, oh, wow, that's what it's like. So I think that was kind of the main reason.
Well, Dean, a quick question here. The inscriptions on the craft that the gentleman tried to shake, and it was so embedded into the ground, even though it was hovering above the ground, but it had no give to it, which is really strange. But the inscriptions, were they ever able to decipher what language or what those were?
I don't think so. I don't think. I mean, I know he because wasn't there also, was it, I don't know if it was it Peniston or Peniston who was it that had the download where basically they filled a notebook full of basically computer code of ones and zeros.
And this is before this. It was Peniston, exactly. And this is before binary code was known. This is 1980. This is way in advance, where it was a regular thing. And the only way he was able to get it out of his brain was that night was to write it all out. In fact, his commander Holt told him, because he was young. I mean, this guy was 24 years old when he had this experience, and he said, the way to cover your ass in the military is to document, journal everything. So there's no question. So he went to that de facto setting in his brain, just wrote it all out. And then in episode 2, we actually reveal what the decipher is with a couple extra things that hadn't been done before. Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, tremendous.
Yeah. And also, I think I just want to point one of the other thing is Rendlesham is also another great example of the explanation being more absurd than aliens. So these are all the people who saw this thing were security officers at a nuclear armed base. They have bunkers full of nuclear weapons. And these are the security officers. Their job is to keep these nuclear weapons safe. But the explanation for Rendlesham Forest is that all of these men mistook a lighthouse for a UFO. That there was a lighthouse and I'm assuming the lighthouse had been there for all the time that they had been stationed at this base. But for some reason that night, they lost the ability to recognize this lighthouse that they had been to. They had visited that lighthouse on their time off. They had seen it every night that they had been there. But that night, they suddenly couldn't tell the difference between a UFO actually underneath their hands and a lighthouse. And there are people who will tell me, when you talk about Renton, say, "Oh, that was all explained." Yeah, it was a lighthouse.
There was one guy who offered an explanation who wasn't even there. He was in the military, but he wasn't even there. And he says, "Oh, this is all." The problem is, anytime you come out with a big case, like the problem I had with the Encounter Netflix show, is like the aerial school phenomenon, which is just a whole other textbook case. One student came out who's been having issues, let's say, came out and said that he told the other kids, 60 plus of that, actually turns out it was closer to 100, including the teacher, that he put a bug in the other kids' ears that, oh, it's a UFO and it's aliens, and they all ran with it. It doesn't work that way in any scale. But it's kind of like whenever these shows come out, especially with Netflix, they want to have a counter to this, and they're almost kind of desperate to do that. And so, again, what David just says it all. It was more fantastical than the actual, event. It's also extremely disrespectful to these officers who, put their life on the line, because if the shit hits the fan, they're going to be the first, casualties, guarding that base.
Right. Well, the documentary is Alien Perspective. It's incredibly well done. It goes over two incredible UFO sightings with all these witnesses and the reenactment and the actual video, but also has the thread of your professor with these objects that apparently are not from this earth, that it's revealed at the very end. So the best part is we're all waiting on part 2. So when does part 2 come out?
Okay, so I can tell you this. This will be the first time that we'll be announcing this. So the Alien Perspective Part 2 is going to have its world premiere at Contact in the Desert, which is a fantastic Indian Springs convention. And so that will be, I believe it's going to be showing May 30th or May 31st. And then it will drop that following day, June 1st, also on Apple TV and Amazon. We've only got 4 more months, something like that. My math is bad, but it's coming up. So you'll definitely want to see the first one in order to take in the second one.
Yeah. Can you give us a little spoiler or the foreign objects, or where they?
Oh, sure. So what the objects are is.
Yeah, awesome.
I knew it.
Sorry, I froze. I froze.
I love it.
That's great. That's great. Well, guys, you guys have been so generous with your time. We've had so much fun researching all this stuff. We've been texting each other, going down these rabbit holes with you guys. It's so much fun.
I've been bugging John and Jerry every day with like UFO news as soon as it comes out. So they're like, "Yeah, we have to have you on this show." So I'm grateful they let me ride shotgun today. So
absolutely. Glad you could be here.
Yeah.
Alien Perspective available on Amazon, guys. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you again for having us. Really fun.